No matter what stage you're in, whether it's long nights and trying to get your babies to sleep, or those spent waiting up anxiously for teenagers to come home, it's a challenge that stretches each of us, and thankful we're not doing it alone. We have the Lord with us. No two parenting journeys are alike. It's tempting to look at other moms or dads and say, boy, I wish we could handle our kids the way they handle their kids. But no two children are alike, and no two parents parenting is alike. Individual responsibilities, individual personalities, family dynamics, and unique circumstances are all different when it comes to raising children. When it comes to living out the scriptures, no amount of faking it will pass the smell test when it comes to your children. If you say one thing and do another, our kids will sniff it out, hypocrisy, and reject the faith you're pretending to believe in. So that's why the Bible calls us not to hear the scriptures only, but to obey the scriptures. Put them in application. Put the scriptures actively in your life and in your children's life. We know the Bible declares that children are an inheritance from the Lord, and we should take that to heart. Also, the greatest tool we have besides the Lord and our families' lives are showing an overabundance of love. Love, a godly love. Through every circumstance, through every trial, through every dilemma, love is the key for success with that child. And if you try to use natural love, humanistic love to raise your children, you may have some problems along the way. But if you use godly love, if you use the love the Bible talks about, and I'm going to explain some of that as we go, you'll find out you'll be a whole lot better off. The Bible says, Romans says, love without dissimulation. That means love without hypocrisy. Love without being a hypocrite about it, all right? When you have both parents in the home, don't shove the raising of the child on the other one. It took two of you to make it. It takes two of you to raise it, right? See? Mom has to discipline as much as dad does. You've heard this saying, well, when your dad gets home.
Too many times.
Too many times. When your dad gets home, you're going to get it. Mom has to be a disciplinarian too. Otherwise, she'll lose the respect of the child. Dad doesn't always have to be the bad guy. If you are raised like that, then when you do something wrong, as a child does something wrong, you'll fear dad coming home. I don't want to be there when dad gets there. You'll separate and cause division between the child and the father. Well, when your dad gets home, Dad, I have a problem. Talk to your mom. Well, that's really not the case. When a child comes to either parent and says, Mom, Dad, I got a problem, then the parents should sit down and talk to them together. Use a little bit of wisdom. And as the children grow older and get into teenage years, they're going to have a lot of questions. The best way to handle that is for mom and dad to go together in prayer and say, God, we don't know what they want to talk about, but they want to talk about something. Give us the wisdom and the understanding and the fortitude to not jump to conclusions and not turning into a yelling match. Okay? Daughters go to moms, sons go to dad. I remember when I was 9 years old, I told my mom, I said, Mom, we lived in the projects in Barberton, Ohio, and everybody could hear everybody because them walls on them houses weren't very thick. And I told Mom, I said, I'm 9 years old. I want to have a heart-to-heart talk with Dad. She said, okay. So a day or so went by, and I said, did you say anything to Dad? No. If you want to talk to Dad, you tell Dad you want to talk to him. So I'm 9 years old. I'm only about so tall. And my dad's 6-something. He's a pretty good-sized guy. And so Dad came home from work one night, and I said, Dad, I think I'm growing into a man. I want to have a heart-to-heart talk with you. Okay. Well, after supper. So after supper, I'm waiting around with anticipation. I got me a list in my mind what I want to talk about. And he said, let's go out and sit in the car. So we went out and sat in the car, and I started crying. And he said, what's the matter, son? I said, I forgot what I was going to talk to you about. I said, I'm scared. He said, don't be scared. He reached over and put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, tell me about school. And we began to open up a dialogue. And about a half hour later, we got out of the car and we got ready to go in the house. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, son, I'm proud of you that you wanted to have this talk. And we built a great relationship because Dad worked 16 hours a day. I didn't hardly ever see him. He'd leave for work in the morning, leave one job in the afternoon, go to a rubber company in Akron, and work till 11:30, 12 o'clock. I never got to see him that much growing up because he worked double jobs. But that was a turning point in my life as a child. So when your children come to you and say, Dad, we need to have a talk. Mom, don't brush it off. Just don't say, well, next week we'll get together and take care of that, because that won't work. That won't work. That'll cause a little bit of division. So let me give you some rules here about raising delinquent children, rebellious children. And if you follow these rules, this is what you're going to have, okay? And this is not to point the finger at anybody, because I'm going to tell you, I made a lot of mistakes raising two boys. Thank God I didn't have girls. Begin with infancy and give the child everything he wants. In this way, when he grows up to believe the world owes him a living, this will bring about entitlement, because you raised him to think everybody owes him something. When he picks up bad words, laugh at him. This will make him think he's cute, and will also encourage him to pick up cutter phrases that will blow your mind later. Never give him any spiritual training. Wait until he's 18 to 21 years old and let him decide for himself what he wants to do. Avoid using words like wrong. This will later condition him to believe that society is against him and he's being persecuted when he steals the car. You with me? Pick up everything he leaves laying around, books, shoes, and clothes. Do everything for him so he will be experienced in throwing all responsibility on others. Let him read any printed material, watch anything he wants to watch. He can get his hands on to take care of his food and his health, and clean his plates for him and make his bed for him. But let his mind feast on garbage. You know the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. You and your spouse quarrel frequently in the presence of your children. This way, they won't be too shocked when the home ends up divided. Give a child all the spending money he wants. Never let him earn his own. Why should he have things tough like I had them growing up? Satisfy his ever craving for food, drink, and comfort. See that every sensual desire is gratified. Denial may lead him to harmful frustrations. Or her. Take his side against neighbors, teachers, policemen, people in authority. Defend him when he's wrong without having the facts. They are all prejudiced against my child. I've known people like that. Their son, their daughter can never do nothing wrong. It's always the other one. It's always the other parents. When he gets into real trouble, apologize for yourself by saying, I never could do anything with that child. Prepare for a life of grief. because that's what you're going to have. If you follow these rules of raising a rebellious child or a delinquent child, if we don't teach our children discipline, respect, and honor as they begin to grow, then you don't know what you're going to end up with. It could be that one of the best tools we have in understanding our children or grandchildren is communication. That could be one of our greatest tools. Maybe we should listen to what they have to say. Maybe, Mom and Dad, you think you know it all or know them, but don't understand them because they don't get a chance to talk. They don't get a chance to express how they feel about something. They don't get it. If the Lord was that with us, we would never get anywhere with the Lord. But he takes us at our word. He allows us to bring our petitions before him. And in doing so, he has an answer. Okay? They don't get to choose. They don't get the chance to express themselves growing up. How are they going to express themselves in life? We say, well, you can come to us about anything. Don't worry about it. But it usually becomes a yelling contest because you don't like what they have to say, and they sure don't like what you got to say sometimes, but there's no communication. The Bible says, communicate, forget not. Our views change about our parenting over the years. I wish I could take my boys and start over with what I know now, but that's impossible. But what I can do is be there with a voice and a helping hand to give advice to my daughter-in-laws and my sons on if they run into a problem. Experience sometimes is the best teacher. Let's look at Mom and Dad over the years. At 4 years old, my dad can do anything. My mom knows it all at 4 years old. At 8 years old, Dad doesn't know anything. At 12 years old, oh, well, naturally, fathers don't understand. Mom, Dad's just out of touch. At 25 years old, he comes up with good ideas once in a while. At 30 years old, let's find out what Dad thinks about it. You see the maturity starting to come in? At 35 years old, let's have a little patience. Let's get Dad and Mom's input before we take this step. At 50 years old, what would Dad think about this? What would Mom do in this situation? I've got a teenage daughter getting ready to get married, and she's got questions, and she's raised in a different era than I am. I got a son that's getting ready to get married. He has questions, and he's raised in a different time than I was raised in, and things are completely different, and I need good wisdom and counseling. And there's nothing wrong with going to your pastor for counseling or his wife for counseling or somebody you have respect for that's been maybe through this to get some good counseling. But don't let your counseling change what the book says. Stay in the book. If you stay in the book, you won't go wrong. At 50 years old, what would Dad think about that? At 60 years old, I wish I could talk to Dad once again. You don't miss the water till the well runs dry. Kids grow up so fast. So fast. Rick told me the other day, he said the kids are growing way too fast. Way too fast. I want them to stay little. Well, when mine left home, I broke their plate and sold their bed. No, just kidding. They still found a roll away when they come back. It would actually be a lot easier to talk about good dads in the Bible rather than bad dads, because there were a lot of bad dads, but very few good ones. In fact, pretty much everywhere every well-known man in the Bible, primarily in the Old Testament, they allowed their children to get away with things, and in some cases did things to their children that in today's society, their children would be taken away from them and they would be put in jail. So let's look at some examples from some famous dads that we hold up very highly. So I went through and I found some examples of bad dads, bad moms, good dads, and good moms. And that way you don't have to take my opinion. This is what the book says. Okay? Let's look at Abraham, the father of many nations. I want to make sure we didn't have any young people in here. Slept with his wife's concubine, Hagar, because he and his wife Sarah became impatient waiting on God's promise for their son. The concubine Hagar had a son named Ishmael, and Abraham later sent Hagar and Ishmael off into the desert with a skin of water and some food, and after he had promised the promised son through Sarah, Isaac. I didn't mention that Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac on an altar because God told him to do this. And some big lies he told were later retold by Isaac. That comes in the process of reaping and sowing. Reaping and sowing. And we'll get into that here in just a minute. Let's look at Isaac. And I have scripture for all this if you want them. Isaac played favorites with his children. Bad thing to do. Favored Esau over Jacob. His wife Rebekah favored Jacob over Esau. You can't show favoritism in the family. There has to be equal love, equal compassion, equal time with each and every one of them, depending on the age. Depending on the age. This created some serious sibling rivaling. As Jacob first stole Esau's birthright, later Esau stole blessings from Isaac. As a result, Esau planned to kill Jacob, so Jacob had to run away. Disunity in the family because of favoritism. Not a good thing. What about Jacob? Notice I'm talking about our patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Two of his sons, Simeon and Levi, went into the city and killed every male because one man had raped his sister. They then looted the town and took all the children and wives for this, and they only got a verbal rebuke from Jacob. Only a verbal rebuke from Jacob. Another of his sons, Reuben, slept with his concubine before his daddy had died. In addition, yet another son, Judah, had sex with and impregnated his own daughter-in-law. You see how it begins to snowball? Because back, somebody forgot to take a parental advice and do things properly and begin to correct things in their lives. So we go into Exodus 20 where it says that he visits the sins of the fathers on the 3 and 4 generations. We're already now in the 3rd generation. Just as his father Isaac and Rebekah did, Jacob played favorites with his children. He favored Joseph over his other sons. For this, Joseph's brothers hated him and eventually sold him into slavery. They covered this up by lying to their father Jacob, said he was killed by another animal. And was actually in the pit. What about Lot? He offered his 2 daughters to a mob to be abused. He later got drunk, slept with his daughter several times, and the result of these 2 sons, the Ammons and the Moabites, were the fathers of the Amorites and the Moabites, 2 of Israel's greatest enemies. Lot, being a nephew of Abraham, the father of many nations, now his nephew creates incest with his 2 daughters, and they become 2 of the greatest enemies against Israel. Look at the progression, because things don't get stopped and parenting takes a back seat. Okay? Let's talk about Eli. Eli, the high priest. Eli's 2 sons were called worthless men. who did not know the Lord, yet they served as priests. They had a total lack of reverence for God and disobeyed him on a regular basis. They also slept with the women who served at the entrance of the tabernacle. For this, Eli simply offered a minor verbal rebuke for that. What is wrong with Eli? God even told Eli that he honored his sons above him. For the things Eli's sons did, God said he would kill him. And later this happened. So when we begin to look at Exodus 20 and Exodus 34 and different other subject matters on this, we see that Moses told them in the law that because of the sins of the fathers, the children would reap those sins for 3 and 4 generations, but it doesn't stop there. Of them that hate me. So the key is, if our next generation, our children, grow up to hate God like the fathers did, then they're going to reap the sins of the fathers. But this was changed over in Ezekiel 18 when God says, well, just let me turn there, because I don't want to misquote that. If you have your Bible, you can turn to Ezekiel 18 and you can see this. He says, the word of the Lord came to me saying, what mean ye that ye use this proverb concerning the land of Israel? The fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. What he's saying here is, if you begin to read this chapter, he's beginning to set up some ethical instructions for parenting and responsibility. And what he's saying is, the soul that sins, it shall die. The soul that sins. And he says in verse 20, the soul that sinneth, it shall die. The son shall not bear the iniquity of the father, neither shall the father bear the iniquity of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon him, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon him. So what he's saying here is, like the pastors taught, and many people have taught many times, that the generation you're in does not have to reap what the past generation did. We can stop it now. But the only way we're going to stop it as parents is if we begin to understand that I've got to have a righteous life in the eyes of God so that my children pick up on that seed, that lifestyle, and not the lifestyle of a wicked parent. Because if you pick up on the wicked parent and become a hater of God, you will reap the sins of the father and the mother. But if you turn to God and say, no, I'm going to have every precept, every concept, every statute of the Word of God, I'm going to obey it to the letter, like he said in Deuteronomy chapter 6. Amen? All right, now listen. In defense of these fathers and many others I didn't mention, I believe some of these problem children may have been a result of a father or a mother not maintaining a proper balance between doing God's work and spending time with their families. Now this is a big problem. This can be a big problem if you don't monitor your activities well. So let me just say this. If you're involved in church work, there has to be a balance between church work and family life. There has to be. Let me tell you the mistake I made. The mistake I made was I got in church in 1981 and I went hog wild for the church. Pastor Nelson was building. We built on the church we had. We bought 25 acres. And I worked 12-hour days, only worked 7 days a month. And the rest of my time, I was at the church driving nails, laying block, whatever I could do to build that church. Because I was gung-ho for the Lord and I want to do something for the Lord. And in doing that, my family suffered a lot. My vacations were at the church. My days off were at the church. The boys were at the church in the Christian school. The wife was there teaching the high school kids for 8 years. But my life was consumed in getting an education and working for God at that church property. And I was wrong. I was dead wrong for that. because I was out of balance. And I didn't recognize that until after the kids were grown and gone. And then I started realizing, man, I messed up like a soup sandwich. I messed up. And thank God, it's the mercy of God that the boys turned out to be good men of God, and their children are too. And it's not basically because I was interactive in their lives a lot. It's because of God's mercy. And the same thing it is with these men I were just talking about. And what it says is this. It says that the same thing can happen to us, but because God looked at their heart. They were sincere in what they were doing. So when you let your church involvement supersede your responsibilities to the family as mom and dads, there's a problem. There's a problem. I should have never taken vacation and worked at the church when the kids were out of school in the summertime. I should never. I had 13 weeks of vacation a year. I could have rearranged this and done a better job as parent, as a dad. But I didn't. I didn't understand that. So I'm here to tell you, don't let that happen to you. Don't let that happen to you. Put a scale out in front of you, family and God. And if they're going to tip anyway, tip a little bit towards the spiritual side, but don't let it tip towards the carnal side so much. Let there be a scale in there. Sometimes, however, when a child has a terrific godly father who raises his child right, and I think of Manoah and Samson, that child can still fail to follow the Lord. In these cases, we must simply turn that child over to God and pray for him or her. We must realize that all of us, as fathers and mothers, make mistakes with our children as they grow up. There are things we wish we could have done different. Things we wish we had said or didn't say. However, if we seek to follow God with all of our heart and follow God's biblical principles for raising our children, here is a promise I believe we should hold on to. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he won't depart from it. Abraham, Isaac, Moses, Jacob, Samuel, David were all called heroes of faith in Hebrews 11 by God. By God. And David was called a man after God's own heart. Lot was called righteous, as was Abraham. So was Noah, a righteous man. They all messed up in their parenting, but God knew their hearts, and he knew the hearts of all men and women today. He knew their hearts. He knew they had good intentions. He knows our heart. We'll make mistakes. We can fix them and work through them. And we know that all things work out for the good of them who are called and chosen by God for his purpose. As grandparents, how do I butt in without being told to butt out? How do you do that? Answer, baby steps. Baby steps. A guy took over a church as a pastor. They had the organ on this side. They had the piano on this side. He said, this is not going to work. Everybody's doing hand signs. So after service on Sunday, he took the piano and moved it over next to the organ. People come to church that night, and the church about split over it. That piano and that organ's been there for 50 years. What right you got to move it? Wednesday night, they were separated again. And over the course of several months, a little inch at a time, they got it over next to that organ. And the people said, you know what, Pastor? That does sound and look better over there. Baby steps. Baby steps. That's what it takes to raise children today and to butt in when you're not wanted. Protecting your child from outside influences, even when it's family. Let me tell you what I had to do with my dad. And I hated to do this. But I had a responsibility to raise my children in the fear of the Lord. Dad wasn't in church when we got in church. Dad didn't get the Holy Ghost till he was 57 years old. Kids were growing up in their teenage years, and Dad was a drinker, smoker, used a lot of bad language. And I couldn't be a hypocrite. I couldn't tell the kids, you don't get around people like this, and you don't fellowship with people like that, and then me have a different standard when it comes to my dad. So I went to Dad and I said, Dad, we got to have a talk. And he said, all right, what do you want to talk about? I said, Dad, I love you, but I can't have you talking and saying the things you talk around the boys. I just can't do it. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, Dad, I'm trying to raise them boys to serve the Lord. I'm trying to get them to heaven, and you come and you blast this out and you blast that out, and when I come over here to your house with the kids, you know, you're drinking and you don't care what you say. I said, they love you, you're their grandpa, but I cannot have that environment around them. And so I'm asking you, if you can't straighten up, you can't come around them. And I'm not going to bring them around you. Man, that tore me up. I hated to do that. That was my dad. That's their grandparents. But I had to train up the children in the way they should go. I had to protect them with everything I had. And Mom, I don't know if you remember me telling Dad that or not, but I know the boys don't. But I had to do that. I had to make a stand for righteousness. Hard thing to do. I'm not telling you to go to your dads or your moms and tell them to beat feet. I'm not telling you that. Good fathers in the Bible that did great things. Abraham, the father of many nations. Isaac, the son of Abraham. Joseph, hated by his brothers. Moses, the lawgiver. King David, a man after God's own heart. King Solomon, the wisest man in the world. Job, a man of great faith. These all did great things, but they were bad parents at some point in time. What about some women who are some influential women in the Bible? Sarah, the mother who waited. Hagar, the mother who endured. Rebecca, the mother who believed. Leah and Rachel, the women who had to share. Moses' mother, the mother who hid or had a hiding plan for her son. Samson's mother, the mother followed the rules. Naomi, the mother-in-law who shared her faith. Hannah, the mother who kept her promise. Mary, the woman that was blessed among all women. Let me give you 5 tips on how to demonstrate the gospel to your children and to raise them in a godly way. Talk about how much God loves them. Teach the concepts of right and wrong. There's never any right in doing wrong. There's never any wrong in doing right. Parent with unconditional love. Talk about how sin affects relationships. Create a culture of forgiveness in the family. Our children need to see that faith matters and it's relevant to our daily situations in life. That's real. Every decision, every statement affects the children's life. What do you do when you feel like a bad parent? What would you do if your child came to you and said, you're not a good dad. You're not a good mom. What would you do? Well, you can reach out to others, like I said earlier. The first thing to do is start praying. Do a checkup from the neck up, like Brother Smith says. And everybody has an opinion, but the Lord's opinion is right. Admit, listen, this is one of the greatest things we can't do. We can't admit when we make a mistake, can we? That's a hard thing to do. I can't hardly say it. I was wrong. I made a mistake, Jose. See? Kids are going to want to know why they have to do some things. Don't do what I said. I said, that's just the way it is. I'm the dad. Do it. Get over it. That's not the answer. That's not the answer. The answer is not because I said so. That won't work. If you don't have the answer, I'm sure the world has the answer for him. All right? Boy, I sure learned a lot after my boys were raised. Let me give you some good guidelines for parenting, and I'm almost done. Good guidelines for parenting. Be consistent. Be consistent with your expectations, your discipline, and responses to your child's needs. Be a role model. A model in behaviors that you can exhibit. Communication. Talk with your child and listen to what they have to say. You may not like it, but listen. They must learn to express themselves, and the only way they can learn to express themselves in a godly way is in a godly home with godly parents. Set limits and guidelines. Don't use the word rules, because our Adam nature causes us to rebel against rules and authority. So use this. Say, I'm going to set some guidelines, not rules. Establish house guidelines and consequences to follow those that violate them. Reward good behavior at home, academically. Praise your child for doing things right, no matter how small it is. Praise that child. Discipline with love. Never discipline when you're emotionally upset. It'll cause division. The Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child. Whooping that child is not going to kill him. They may think it is, but it ain't going to kill him. I can tell you, I'm a living example of that. The Bible says, spare the rod. That does not mean you use the rod as a weapon to get even after the discipline takes place. There needs to be a time of prayer with the child and an understanding of why discipline had to take place. You broke the guidelines. You broke the guidelines. We talked about this when we set them up, and you agreed to the guidelines. Compassion. Be willing to make changes to adjust to what's best for the child as they begin to get older. The guidelines you had for the 5-year-old is not going to work for the 16-year-old. Remember, if they don't come to you, they'll go to somebody else. The Bible says in Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go. In the Hebrew, it says, train up a child in the way he is bent. In the way he is bent. And what they're talking about there, as I began to raise my boys, I learned this concept years ago. As parents, we need to find out what the gifting is that God has given them. And we need to understand, and we need to know how to nurture that talent. Rick's was music. So, yep, go to Bible college, play music, whatever you want to do. Chad's was computers, computer science. So we went that way. I didn't want the boys to be raised and do the things I want them to do. I like for them to do, but that wasn't God's plan. So we have to raise our children. We watch our children grow, and we watch what their interest is, and we watch what they want to be involved in, so that that's the way God bent them. And no two children are going to be bent the same. Hey? Reed loves music. Well, Chad's boy Carson loves music. So they're both playing piano. They both love music. Don't know what Cassius is yet. Don't know what Nene's is other than singing. Kendall, my other granddaughter, it's singing. They like to sing. So as parents, their responsibility is to look at that, what God has given them, and help guide them in a way that they can use that to exalt God. That's the way it needs to be, in my humble opinion. And if we do it anything different than that, we may be looking for problems in the family. All right? All right, Rick, all yours.
Well, he stole all my notes. So you're going to hear a little repetition. I will say one of the most valuable lessons my dad taught me, I was probably, 6 years old, 7 years old, somewhere right around there, 8 years old. And we had gotten a BB gun. And He wanted us to understand what that BB gun, what kind of damage it could cause. So he took the BB gun from us. He said, you don't shoot it at things. You don't shoot it at windows. You don't shoot it at cars. You don't shoot it at, other than what I put out here for a target, that's the only thing you're allowed to shoot this BB gun at. He goes, because it'll cause damage. So he said, let me show you what I mean. And he took that BB gun, put a BB in it, picked it up and pointed at the back window of his car and shot the window out of his car as an example of what the BB gun could do. So, yeah, yeah. So that was a fond memory growing up of many that I could share tonight of things that I learned from my dad and my mom. And you have to excuse me, I get choked up because it's one thing to get up and teach this class on your own, but to have your mom and dad in the room with you, and I've never voiced this to him or my mom that I know of. But he talked about how one of his greatest mistakes is how much he gave it to church. There was many years I resented the church. I resented how my dad picked the church over me. And I didn't realize until I was older and it became apparent myself that how much it bothered me. It took me years, and I find myself as a parent, you can ask my wife, that I'm jumping ahead of my notes, but one of the most important things to me as a parent is to be present. I've been out of town a lot lately with work, not by choice, but it's cost a little bit of money, but I've made sure I've been home for my kids' football games. I've been home for anything special they had going on. I've been trying to be here for church, to be present, to be that example for them, because it bothered me as a kid. And I don't say that to be disrespectful of my dad, because also in that, it helped develop who I am and who my brother is. Every summer, we, as far back as I can remember, I don't remember a summer where we weren't meeting at 6 a.m. at the Mountaineer Restaurant for breakfast with Pastor Nelson and some of the other men in the church before we went and worked all day at the church in my summers. I mean, what kid wants to spend their summers I'm not talking about a week in the summer or a month in the summer. For years, every summer, it was, we're up in the morning, we got to leave, we're meeting for breakfast, and we're going to be at the church working all day. And let me just get started here, and we'll get on that. Yeah, you can pass them out. Keys for successful parenting is how I titled this tonight. The first thing, step one, in the keys to parenting is walk in the Spirit. Every fruit of the Spirit will be required to be a successful parent. You've got to learn to love, you've got to have joy, you've got to have peace, patience, and kindness. You must show goodness and faithfulness, be gentle, and have self-control. It is imperative if you want to be successful as parents. You must exercise and try. I'm not going to say you're going to master it. I've never mastered all of them. I don't know that anyone's mastered all of them, but you must try daily to apply the fruits of the Spirit to your parenting. 2, you must work together as a team. You and your spouse have to be on the same page. It's not going to work if one parent is saying one thing and another parent says another. It shows the kids divisiveness. It shows them a lack of unity. It starts making them learn, I can go to mom for this, and she'll give me what I want, and I can go to dad for this, and dad will give me what I want, because the opposites of that happen. Dad will give me, but mom won't, and mom will give me, but dad won't, in these different scenarios. They also start creating a conflict between the parents, because dad said yes when mom would have said no, and mom said yes when dad would have said no. And they play against each other and will cause you to not parent at the level you need to be effective in training your kids. Number 3 is resolve all conflicts. Every unresolved conflict will begin hardening the heart of your child. Every unresolved. You'll think a day or two went by and you didn't take care of it. Everything's back to normal. They're giving you hugs. They're giving you kisses. Talking to you normal, but that conflict is still setting in them. You must learn to resolve conflict. If there's conflict with your child, if your child has disobeyed, if your child is not wanting to do what you want them to do, you must spend the time to sit down and resolve that conflict with them. Do not let bitterness and resentment begin to develop inside of them. When there are problems with attitudes towards God, typically means there's unresolved conflicts in the home. Number 4, very important, togetherness. As I said a minute ago, be present. Don't miss, if you can absolutely, I know not everybody has a job where I'm fortunate, where I'm self-employed, my son will get to determine that, but at all costs and at all emphasis you can give it, be present. Be present's not just showing up for the football game or showing up for this event at school or showing up for the Christmas play at the church. Being present is when you're at home. After a long day of working, be present. Talk to your kids. Ask them how their day was. Help them with the homework. Take interest in what they're doing when they want to talk to you. Put the phone down. Turn the TV off. Shut the mower off. Whatever it is you're doing, whatever it is, stop and give them your attention and be present in their lives in the moment when they're talking to you, but also be present in their activities and whatnot. Togetherness is game nights together. It's their sporting events. It's activities that they like to do. For the longest time, when the boys were younger, Friday night became our family night. We would read like putt-putt. So every Friday night, we would usually go find a place to get some pizza. We would try to do pizza joints, and we would play putt-putt. And then Cash came along, and we would play putt-putt. And a lot of our pictures, I was going back through some photos the other day, and a lot of our, even on vacations, we'd go on vacations and we would find a place to play putt-putt. Because it was what they were into. They really enjoyed it. They could be competitive with us at it to a degree. And we played a lot of putt-putt. And as I've gotten older, it's obviously interests change. But we try to spend time together. Usually, football season messes it up some with Reed now. But Friday nights is still our family night. We try to protect that time, that whatever else is going on in the week, Friday night is our night. Where we try to do something together. It still usually involves pizza somewhere outside and trying a new pizza joint around town. But we recently, just the other night, we started playing, we played Scrabble together, which, by the way, I won. I think my wife picked the game. I gave a few options, and Scrabble wasn't one of them. She picked it as a I think she thought she could beat me. But lo and behold, meals, excuse me, meals together. Try to make it an effort. These are practical things, guys, but they're necessities. Having meals together around the table, not grabbing your plate and going and sitting on the couch with the TV on, but at the table, talking to each other, conversing, and spending that time together. That togetherness is going to help mold and shape your kids. It's going to let them know you care. And like anything in life, you really don't care about me unless I care about you, right? So show your kids you care. Spend that time with them, that quality time eating a meal and talking about whatever they want to talk about or you want to talk about. And take interest in their interest. Whatever they have an interest in, get into it with them. I'm having the hardest time. My boys are really into video games. As any teenage boy is, he never let me be a video game guy. If he caught us playing a video game, it was go outside, we got a fence post to dig. We have our old house where we lived at, I was joking with him about it yesterday. I said, whoever bought that house from us has to be confused on why there's all these fence posts randomly around the yard and no fence. Because he would always send us out there. If you got nothing better, don't say you're bored. If you ever said you're bored in front of him, grab the post hole diggers and go dig a fence post. And we had random fence posts. It was like Stonehenge around our house with fence posts. We just never put a fence up. Never. There's never been a fence there. But we had fence posts everywhere. I don't know if he got them free, if they buy one, get one free at Home Depot. I don't know what it was. But that's what we had to do. If we were playing video games, go outside, I got work to do. But I say all to say, take interest. I didn't have interest in digging fence posts, Dad. That was your interest, not mine. But take interest in your children. Take interest in what they're interested in. Share that time with them. Number 5, devotions and prayer. That's an important one. It's hard. I'm going to tell you, it's hard to find time every night to do that as a family. But you can find one night a week where you say, we're all going to gather together. Our boys are old enough, that's something we haven't implemented yet. I want to implement here is having them start teaching us a devotion. Dad said he's not sure what Cash loves teaching children. He's only 13 years old, but he absolutely loves teaching in children's ministry. It's a passion of his. He takes it serious, and I want to cultivate that. I want to show interest in that with Cash. I want to help him develop that interest and that passion he has for teaching, and help him be better at that. So spending time together in devotions. Find your kids age-appropriate materials. Find them in ages. You'll spend some money, guys. It's going to happen, but spend the money. I mean, you can't spend a better dollar than finding an age-appropriate Bible, age-appropriate devotions, age-appropriate literature that they will have interest in reading and want to spend that time on it. That's good spent money. And then having heart-to-heart conversations with your kids. This all ties together with that time, being present with them. This is all that you're spending time with them. So have heart-to-heart conversations. Let your kid open up. Get your kid comfortable opening up to you. Reed is an open book. He'll tell us anything and everything, and probably 4 times. He likes to talk. He likes to tell us everything. Cash, on the other hand, he came in this morning upset, walked over to me. He was all happy because he got his first new suit to wear to church. He wanted a suit, so we took him and got him a suit. We want to, again, trying to make him feel happy and special and teaching. He sees other people wear suits, and I should be wearing a suit, so we got him a suit. And this Sunday morning was his first time wearing it. Now, he was running late getting dressed, and I had to be out the door and be here. And so there's consequences to your decisions, right? So I didn't get to help him with his tie before I left. I said, you're going to have to come to church. Let me put your tie on at the church. Well, he was also still running late, and my wife had to be here. So she was rushing him out the door, forgot his belt, a couple other things he did, and it had him all. He comes over and stands to me next to me at the sound booth and just stands here like this looking at me. But I could see in his face he was upset. And I looked at him and I said, what's wrong, bub? And he started to well up. He got red and started, and he just turned around and ran off down the hallway here. If you were here this morning, I don't think anybody was on this morning here. Ran off and ran in the bathroom. Well, here I go, right behind him, chased me in the bathroom. I said, hold on. He started running into a stall, locked the door, and I said, come back out here. I said, you can do whatever you want after, but I got to put this tie on you. So get out here and let me put this tie on you. So as I'm putting the tie on him, he's just crying, and I said, what's the matter? He's like, Mom was rushing me out the door. Well, first he wouldn't talk. He just sits there and looks at you. So finally I got him to talk. He said, Mom was rushing me out the door, and I didn't get to finish getting ready right, and I'm missing my belt, and all, his world was falling apart in front of him. But it's hard to get Cash to open up. He just won't. It's not easy for him to talk. We have jokes because he uses one-word replies. You'll say, hey, why did you do that? Reasons. That's his reply. Or, so it's a family joke now when he's not upset that we'll use one-word replies back to him because he struggles with opening up. But you've got to sit down, be patient with him, and eventually, my wife's better at it than I am at times, most times, because I'm like, you're going to tell me what's wrong, you're going to tell me right now. I'm going to get the belt. Start talking. But you've got to give him his space and let him, eventually he's going to calm down and he's going to begin opening up and telling us, having those heart-to-heart conversations that are necessary. Kids need to know that they can trust, they can tell you anything. Doesn't mean it ain't going to have consequences later, but they got to trust you that they can tell you anything and have confidence that you'll listen and handle them with proper care. All right? Number 6 is help them build friendships in the church. Facilitate outings, trips, sleepovers, campouts, hangouts. There's no better, we hope there's no better friends than what they're going to make at the church. Pay attention to who they're hanging out with. It's important to know who your kids are making friends with and guard your kids. Guys, we have one shot at this. One shot. I don't know if they did this on purpose or if it was strategic, but I know our house growing up was an open door. Anybody and everybody could come over and hang out at our house anytime they wanted to a period of time. There would come a period of time when Dad would come to the foot of the stairs and say, guys, it's getting late. You don't have to go home, but you got to get up out of here. And everybody would have to leave because he had to get up and go to work the next day, or this was going on or that was going on. But our house was a place where we hung out a lot. My friend Jesse, growing up, he would come spend a week at our house. We lived, it's like 45 minutes or so apart from each other. We lived this direction from the church, and they lived that direction from the church. So we would meet at church on Sundays, and then he would come to my house for the week in the summers, come back to church on Sunday, and I'd go to his house for a week in the summers. But my mom and dad helped cultivate those relationships and those friendships because they were safe. They were people that were solid. They were friends that were solid. They would pay attention to what we would talk about, what we would do. I don't know how many times, probably don't realize, but they'd be standing at the top of the stairs listening to our conversations downstairs. We would know because you'd hear the floorboards going, eek, eek, right at the top of the stairs, especially Mom. Mom was always snooping. But that's good parenting. We should know what our kids' conversations are. We didn't have cell phones back then. If you're paying for that phone, you have every right to know what's on that phone. Don't be afraid to take that phone from your kids when they get to that age, if they're not there already, and say, randomly, Reed, let me have that phone. I need to see what's on there. And go through there. Be smart enough to know how to find things they hide in the phone. Okay? Hold them accountable to that. I'm going to throw this in there. I don't have this in my notes because but your kids don't need social media, okay? There's nothing good in it for them. There's nothing. There's too much bad available in social media versus the good that comes from it. Reed's been begging us. He's getting ready to turn 17, and he's been begging us for Instagram because the youth use Instagram to do a lot of communications about what's going on. They'll post on their stories, I think? They'll post stories showing tonight's or this week's schedule's this or upcoming rally this or that. They'll do it on Instagram versus text messages or anything else that they could use. They use it. So he's been arguing with me to give him Instagram. And I was ready to cave. I ain't gonna lie to you. A few weeks ago, I said something to her. I was like, you know what? Maybe we should just he's almost 17. Let's let him get it. And she was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I said, baby, he's a trustworthy kid. Reed's a good kid. I mean, Reed's a good kid. I couldn't ask for a better kid than what Reed is. He wants to do good, but the problem is it takes one swipe and the wrong thing pops up on that screen, and it changes everything with his life. Pastor said it recently. I heard him, I don't know if it was in conversation or from the pulpit. I think it was last week from the pulpit. He said, once your eyes see it, you can't unsee it. And I was like, you know what, you're right. He's not getting it. He don't need it. There's no good in it. There's nothing he needs from there that we can't get to him in another way. So if I can admonish anything, do not let your kids have social media. They don't need it. Invest in your child's, I'm going to hurry, guys. I know we're out of time. Number 7, invest in your child's kingdom opportunities. Get them to every church event that you can get them to. Get them in the habit of coming to the house of the Lord. If my parents did anything right with us, is we did not miss church. We did not miss anything going on at the church. Period. If the church doors were open, we were at church. No ifs, ands, or buts. Whether we wanted to go or not, we had to go. If we were sick, no greater opportunity to get a healing than to go to church. So get them to the church. Save money. If you got to make a struggle on, do I buy this new fishing rod or do I put that money for my kids to go to youth camp? I sure hope we pick youth camp. That's a much better investment. Save the money for camps, trips, whatever it be. Do not let cost be the denominating decision maker. And as I said earlier, invest in their interest, especially ministry. If your kids start showing an interest in something ministry related, invest in that. If it's music, buy them a keyboard. I'm not saying you have to buy them the best keyboard, but buy them a keyboard. If it's a guitar, buy them a guitar. If it's they're liking teaching, find materials that will help them be a better teacher. If they like outreach, take them to outreach stuff. Invest in them. Spend the money. If they're playing football, it's okay to invest in that. It doesn't matter that it's not a church-related thing, but invest in it. Give them the cleats. Give them whatever they need that they can be successful at it and not feel that they can't be because they're missing something. Right. Invest in your kids. Invest in their interests. Make sure your children feel close to other spiritual adults that you trust. There comes a point where they get awkward with you a little bit, and they may need someone else that they can confide in. Help them find those people that they can talk to. It's a youth pastor, their pastor, it's other leaders in the church. It could be a close friend of yours that you have a close relationship with that you in confidence, you talk to them and say, hey, could you try touching base on my kid and I, or we're just not on the same page, and I need someone to help me get through to them on what they're struggling with. Have those people that they can go to that they feel comfortable with, and you're comfortable with what advice they're giving, and they can get through to your kids. Practice humility. Model what repentance looks like. Try not to get choked up again, but some of the greatest lessons I've learned in life from my mom and dad are things that they made mistakes and owned them. owned it, didn't try to bury it, didn't try to cover it up, but they accepted it was an error, repented, apologized. There's one situation, I won't give details of it. There's one situation, I was an adult already. I think I was in college, and my dad made a mistake. He made a pretty big mistake. Could have had a lot of ramifications to it. I remember, I think Mom's the one that told me about it. I don't know if I ever talked to Dad about this. But I remember as I was a young adult, 20, 21 probably at the time, and I remember watching from a distance. I'm 5 hours away, and just communications with my mom, communication with my brother mostly about it, and watching from a distance how he responded to his error. It just raised my level of respect for my dad. It just, through his lesson, through the lesson of mistake and how he handled it, we can't be afraid of that. We're going to make mistakes. We are. It's inevitable. We're going to make mistakes. How we respond to those mistakes, not only for our personal salvation, but for those that are watching us, and how they see us respond will mold them and help them know how to deal with those things later in their lives when they come up. Give lots of encouragement, more praise than criticism. Love them unconditionally. Love them unconditionally. Always make them feel loved through everything, good and bad. You want to create a culture in your household that is positive, lots of I love yous, thank yous, and expressions of gratitude. I still tell my mom and dad I love you. Every time I talk to them on the phone, I try to make sure I tell them I love them. My kids, I constantly tell them I love them. My wife, I try to, every time I talk to her, I tell her I love her. You can't say it enough. It's affirmation. It feels good to hear it. Even though it's routine and you're used to hearing it, still hearing it. If someone doesn't say it and you're used to hearing it, like, wait a minute, she didn't, or he didn't tell me they love me this time. What's up? It's affirmation. Servanthood, serve others with your children. Don't hire a babysitter or leave them at home while you tend to your ministry duties. Bring them and make them a part of it. I give kudos to my wife. The reason why Cash at 13 is teaching Sunday school is because my wife has included Cash in what she's teaching back here and a part of it, making him a part when he showed interest in it. And making our kids a part of the ministry. Reed on the keys. I'm encouraging Reed all the time. You know, before he was playing, come to practice, hang out at practice. If I was practicing, come up in the music room, practice with me. Make your kids a part of it. Let them experience it. Let them help set up chairs, tear down chairs. Let them help clean up, because it's going to teach them what true servanthood is. And of course, structure, discipline, consistency of a daily routine is imperative. Don't let your kids just randomly eat dinner when they want to eat dinner, eat breakfast when they want to eat breakfast, go to bed when they want to go to bed, do their chores when they feel like they're doing their chores. Have structure in your home. My kids know every night of the week except Friday night, they have a bedtime. They have what time they're supposed to start their showers, what time they're supposed to have their Bible reading devotion stuff done, what time they're supposed to be in bed. And if they don't have those things done, without us telling them at this age, at 16, 13, and 10, if they don't have those things done, they know there's consequences for it. My wife, I think it was yesterday, she said something to Reed. Hey, Reed, I want you to get your trash can in your room here is full. You need to empty it. And at some time, I think it was 10, 20 minutes went by, and he still hadn't dumped that trash can. And there was consequences. She came back down a little bit later, and she said, Reed, I told you 20 minutes ago to dump this trash can, and this trash is still in the can. Now you're grounded. The simplest of things like that. But he's got to know there's structure and there's organization, and when you're told something, you do it. Unless you ask and you're given a period of time later. Kids must be taught what is expected of them. Kids thrive knowing what to expect in an environment. It's going to help them as an adult when they grow up. It's going to help them know how to deal with a boss and how to deal with having a spouse and how to deal with their kids. Structure is one of the best things you can provide to them. Rules and boundaries create a peaceful home. Last, and probably most importantly, that encompasses everything I've talked about tonight, more is caught than taught. Now, you can tell your kids to read their Bible. If they never see you reading their Bible, they don't believe you. You can tell your kids to make their bed. You don't make your bed, they don't believe you that it's important to do that. You tell your kids it's important to be on time, and you're never on time, they're never going to believe you that it's important to do that. I have a problem now because we were always religiously 30 minutes early for church. Always. My mom and dad still, I laugh because they still get here 30 minutes early before church starts. It's just a routine, a structure that they have. And my dad taught us at a young age never to be late for something. That being late is one of the most selfish things that you can do because you just disrupted everybody else's schedules by you being late. And I won't say beat that into me, but pounded that into us that it's important to be on time. And if you're on time, you're late. Be early. So teach that to your kids. You know, as much as I say I resented my dad for a period of time as a teenager and whatnot, at the same time, seeing what he did and how he worked at the church and he gave himself to the church, I picked up on that. My brothers picked up on that. And we're committed to doing what we can to see the church furthered because we watched our dad's example. We watched our mom's example of giving their time and giving themselves to the kingdom. So is there balance in there? Absolutely. Finding that balance is the important part. But remember, more is caught than taught. Don't say it without living it. Part of parenting is us making adjustments. As a single guy, a single woman, or even a youngly married couple with no kids, there's a lot of latitude there where you probably, it doesn't matter much if we do this, but when you first bring that first kid into life, everything changes. And you've got to recognize, you've got to stop and recognize and say, what in my life do I not want my kids to emulate? And you've got to make a conscious decision to make those changes in your personal life. Because if you don't, those things you don't like about yourself, you're going to see it in the next generation of yous. All right? Well, thank you all for your time. If you didn't get a handout, they're right up here. Appreciate you all giving us the time tonight to talk.